Okay, here we go. So welcome everyone. This is our monthly Collaborex member workshop. And I was so happy that I was able to twist Claire's arm to do another workshop. I think the last time you did was more than a year ago.
Yeah, it
And
was.
and I always tell her that this is her test case because we're such a friendly group. So she'll see how it goes and then take it on the road. We're off Broadway. So I'm just thrilled to have Claire. She's a leadership coach and communication strategist who helps business owners and professionals develop stronger, healthier ways of working with others. Hence the topic of our workshop. She has a background in both entrepreneurship and organizational consulting, and she brings a grounded, real world approach to personal and professional growth. Claire, thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me. All right, let's dig in. So, this came about because I don't know, especially over the last week, it seems like the theme with my clients is helping them have difficult conversations. So, and sadly, almost all conflict, if not all conflict, involves having difficult conversations. So, conflict is inevitable, but it's up to us to decide how we want to handle it and how we want to observe it. So, out of every adversity comes an opportunity. The problem is we stay so focused on the adversity that we miss the opportunity. So, as you'll hear from some of my stories, people decided to handle the conflict and came out the better side. So that's my goal, is that as we go through this, you will have you will have some real clear takeaways. And at the end of this in the chat, Jonathan will probably send it out in the follow-up email. I created a handout that's basically what's the tips that I have in here without all the images. So, because I really wanted to make sure you walked away with some good tools. Um, Keep in mind that there's two kinds of conflict. There is work conflict, which is really where we're going to focus most of our time and energy, and then there's personal conflict. The tips and tools that I'm giving you today will apply to both in different measures. So, but I did want to make that distinction because I think a lot of times they're very different. At work, we can have clear expectations in our own personal life that can sometimes get muddy. So, I will say what I've learned about conflict and leadership is that why don't people want to become leaders? Two reasons. They don't want to make difficult decisions and they don't want to have difficult conversations. So, clearing that path and learning how to have a difficult conversation is a lot of what I work on in the leadership training that I do and with my business coaching. So, I am keeping chat open. So I see Ted and Eileen. So I'm glad I got you twice today and you have to jump off at 12:30, but I'm trying to keep an eye on chat because I don't want to be a talking head. So if you have any questions, feel free to jump them in. I've built in some conversation into this. Um, and I want you to, as you go through this, keep in mind who is somebody that you need to have that difficult conversation with. So why do we avoid them? Fear. What is fear? Often false evidence appearing real. Or it's from one of my favorite books, Making Assumptions about what could happen if we have these difficult conversations. So we're fear of escalation. We're fear of hurting somebody. We're fear of damaging relationships. So I'm going to give you a story about a client that I've been working with. And he had one of his employees that he was supervising was consistently late. And if he had a bad day on the job site with the supervisor, he would be off the next day. So, certainly less than ideal behavior from an employee. And Matt had been putting up with this for several months. The thing that he said to me at the end of our first coaching session was, "Why did I wait so long to call you?" Because his boss had been offering me for months. But anyway, so we talked about this. And what we did was, and you'll see this as we go through, I'm giving you an example so you can kind of picture the steps that we're going to go through. So what we did was we pinpointed the problem. He needed to come to work on time, and he needed to come to work even after a tough conversation with George. So we worked out what he wanted. We created a document. He thought about it in advance with clear expectations. He pulled Chris aside, had a heart-to-heart with him, made it clear that he was committed to Chris's success, but that this behavior was not acceptable, and set a time for a follow-up in 3 months, which coincidentally was his annual review. I talked to Matt after that annual review, and he said, Claire, I've never had a better annual review with Chris. And this was his second or third annual review. He's engaged, he's excited, he had clear expectations and felt supported. So even though he was dreading the conversation, he did it and got to the other side. So it's possible. Not only is it possible, it's advisable to have these conversations. So, there are no failures. There are only learning opportunities. And it's the same thing with conflict. There are ways to look at it that are healthier than dreading and fearing a potential outcome. You create stronger relationships, which is certainly the case with Matt and Chris. Better decision making, for obvious reasons, increased productivity. Chris now does show up for work the next day after a tough day with George. So right there is a clean, yes, the anticipation is worse than the conversation itself. I wish more people understood that. More creative and reduce stress. And who doesn't want less stress? Emotions have energy, and that emotion that you are wasting on fearing the conversation and avoiding it is simply a waste in time. So, and it's the same with many things we procrastinate, but today we just happen to be talking about conflict. But once you get to the other side, you realize that a lot of that fear was unfounded. So the 4-part step that you just heard me go through was prepare with intention. And, nothing good happens in the heat of the moment. So I don't often recommend that you try to fix a major issue while it's hot. You got to wait for it to cool down. You have to take some time, go away, think about it, decide, what you want out of it. Then, very critical, praise in public, criticize in private. So creating a safe space, even in Zoom, the last time I did this last week was for a group of call center people, many of whom are working remotely. Even working remotely, you can create a safe space, making sure that no one else is in the room, that they understand that this is going to be a serious conversation. Communicate clearly and stay grounded. And I have some very specific tips for staying grounded so that you don't get pulled off into the emotion of the situation. And then this is particularly true with work situations, focusing on solutions and follow-up. Solutions, yes, and personal, but follow-up in a work situation, follow-up and a known time for that follow-up is really critical to the path to success. All right, let's talk about preparing with intention. So understanding what you want out of the conversation. And, even on a personal thing, my daughter and I just had a confrontation, and I cooled down and I walked out of the room rather than engaging. And then I thought, what do I want out of this conversation? And I got clear on my goals, and then I went back to her. So even in a personal situation, it's good to, in this case, it was stop borrowing money from me, but it could be any variety of things. But and then anticipate their response. And this is critical. In fact, I was just going through, I prefer to call it a performance alignment plan or a plan. I hate PIP. I don't know what about it. I just feel that PIP. Oh, God, no. So performance alignment plan. So what we did is we went through the various steps. Was we anticipated what Linda was going to say before she delivered it. So she built in that anticipated response, a lot of which has to do with facts. Facts are your friends. Now, in personal situations, given the current climate, facts can be, maybe not always so agreed upon. But in a work situation, we often know if the employee came in late, or the employee didn't do what they were supposed to. So facts are your friends, right? So if you say, hey, you're not showing up on time, you have the documentation. It's very hard for them to argue about that. You are not making the phone calls that we agreed you would call. You're not hitting this particular KPI. Have the facts. If you have a situation where he said, she said, do your homework, research it. In fact, one of my clients had a situation where went into a review, prepared to discuss with the employee that she hadn't covered her shifts while she was gone. Turns out she said to the owner of the company, the dad of my client, co-owner, she said, I'm going to cover my shifts. Dad said, don't worry about it. I'm going to have my wife come in. She said, are you sure? He said, yes. He never had his wife come in. She's a receptionist. So for a week, no one was covering the desk. Well, my client didn't check with her first. So went into the meeting and said, you didn't cover your shifts. She said, and luckily George was sitting there. George said he would do it. So do your homework before you meet. And then know the desired outcome. We want you to come in on time. We want you to hit these KPIs. We want you to stop gossiping. Whatever it is, know what you want. Okay, then we have communicate safety and lead with empathy. How perfect that we just did the exercise on empathy this morning in the in CollaborX, right? So create a private, respectful setting. If you do this in public, it's bad for everybody. It's bad for the participants. And I've witnessed this, and I know you've probably witnessed this, somebody being reamed out in public, and it's painful for everybody. So create it, even if you are a Zoom, even if you're remote, you can still make sure that the person is alone and not in a public setting. Empathy. Empathy and understanding means that you are listening to them. Now, giving them the benefit of the doubt, right? And it really, my favorite story about this comes from 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, right? If you know the book, Cubby gets on the subway, a dad gets on with 5 kids. They're very rambunctious. He gets very annoyed and he says, are you going to control their children? And the dad says, well, I'm going to try to, but their mother just died in the hospital. So, you don't know what's going on. So it's always good. People don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. And I'm sure if you think about the people in your life that have led you or you've watched lead, those that care will have the highest degree of loyalty, will have the highest degree of success. So showing that you care and really believing in the other person and listening with empathy. Now, I know it can be very hard to do this when your patience is worn very thin and they've used up every last bit of your patience with their shenanigans. And still, if you can manage to show empathy, one of my people was promoted over a woman on the staff who was both there longer and older and had to do her review. And the prepping that we did for this was how she was going to lead with empathy and say, Julie, thank you very much. I know that this has been a little bit hard for you to have me promoted over you. And I really appreciate you allowing me my new leadership role. So when you can show that kind of understanding and empathy, it's very helpful. So now maintaining emotional control. I'm embarrassed to say that when I went back to one of my people who was my second in command in the finance department, I said, because we owned the company for 33 years. I did start when I was very, very young. And I said to her, so what was it about me that when I was a leader? And she said, well, Claire, when you were pissed at people, everybody knew it. And I went, oh my goodness, I guess my memory of how I was leading is not quite how I would be leading today, knowing what I know now. But maintaining emotional control is very helpful. Reading body language as much as possible. And yes, you can read body language on Zoom. I would recommend doing that. Cameras on, if any of you are leading by remote leadership, and specific facts are your friends. So if you're staying grounded in your facts, it's harder to get pulled off into the emotional morass. So staying focused on this. Okay, so now if I can turn the page, I want to take a pause. So this is a great opportunity for somebody that's been avoiding an issue to jump in. I'm going to leave the screen up for a minute, but I'm encouraging participation. So I've got the chat open. I can see the last entry is the anticipation is usually worse than the conversation itself. A true fact, I think, um, especially if you take all of these steps into account. So I'm going to stop sharing the screen for a minute, and I'm going to give everybody an opportunity to kind of step up and say the brave soul who has a confrontation that they've been putting off, and see if they want to be a guinea pig or an example so that other people can learn. And I just did this with somebody who was dealing with I'm going to assume a 20-something whose line was, "That's not in my job description. And why do I have to do that?" I said, "Change the job description." But then we got into some other suggestions. So, and I'm good with silence. If you want to watch a great show on Netflix, Residence, watch what she does with silence. It's brilliant. All right, Jonathan.
I always talk too much. So, I don't know. When I think about conflict, I think about the relationship I have with my brother.
Oh
And
yeah.
it's, it's a conflict I don't really want to solve. Like, I think I start with what are my goals? And is it ever going to be really like I'm not sure I want a closer relationship with him because I've felt that I've tried to do that for decades. And it's like, okay, he's not going to change. I'm not going to change. Is it better to just let it go or like what's the end result going to be that we're going to hug each other a lot? I don't think so. I
Who
don't
who has a comment?
Just chime in and say, because I think the same. I have a sister that we're very different, right? And there are things that I don't always agree with or care for, but I've also learned that I have to accept her for who she is and be happy when the times are what I want them to be and accept that that's not always going to be that way. So maybe it's not necessarily that your relationship is going to change, but how you frame your interactions and then how you feel about them may change over time.
Yeah, I think, yeah, sometimes it's just not worth the effort. If you keep putting the effort in and it doesn't reap benefits, then for your own sanity. Which is why I'm saying that there's a very different, although in a work situation, um, and I've worked with a lot of my clients on this, it is time to let that person go. And I certainly, in my 30 years of running the business, let go a lot of people that were inappropriate for the company, inappropriate for the timing, and everybody was generally happier after that. Dennis.
Jonathan, I understand who was it? Jonathan with your brother, you said? Jonathan.
Yeah, with my brother.
I understand your circumstance. I went through the exact same circumstance with my older sister throughout my life. I had finally given up like you did. I just couldn't figure out a way to find a comfortable place with her. The challenge was that she died without me knowing about it. My wife saw her obituary in the paper and said, "Did you know?" I said, "No, I didn't." So I'm sad in a way that I gave up, but I was hoping, I mean, well, can't do it over again, but probably a better path for me towards the end of I'm 81 years old, towards the end of my life, and she would have been 89. Would have been to at least knowing that the end is close for her, somehow try to open up some communication that could have some value to it. So that's my advice to you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Claire, do you think that both parties need to have an intent
Yeah,
to want
absolutely.
to
Yeah.
resolve a conflict?
And if the other party does not have the interest, there's so many better ways to spend your time. What's the definition of insanity? Doing the
Right.
same thing over and over
Exactly.
again and expecting different results. So if it's a stop beating yourself over the head, but emotions have energy. So the guilt is damaging and the shame is damaging. So you're better off just accepting it. And we're going to get into don't take things personally. That's one of the slides coming up. Neil.
Yeah, hi. First time with the group, so it's a pleasure to be here. I was
Welcome.
invited by Jonathan. In listening to what you're talking about, I find that it's one of my core beliefs that, no one's ever against me, even if they think they are. Okay. That this isn't something that has to do with me, but it's something they're trying to work out. So if there's a conflict with somebody else, I find that if I stay in curiosity about what it is in them that's bringing this forward, I don't take it personally. I don't get defensive. I don't have to fight back. I just have to have the empathy for whatever it is they're trying to work out and know that they're not against me. They're doing whatever they need to do to survive and whatever they're struggling with in their mind. So it's not that it doesn't hurt sometimes, but it's just like, I just happen to be standing in front of this person right now, and we're trying to work this out. So I really do appreciate what you're saying here. This is a great presentation. Thank you.
Thanks. Yeah, those kinds of people have deep emotional wounds that they're not ready to work through yet. And you can only help them as much as you can. And then you don't need to get sucked down into the vortex with them. You can, wish them well and feel positive vibes for them, and feel love for them and detachment and let them go. And I'm going to go back. So thank you, everyone. And I'm going to go back to the screen. Um, so, and then part 4, right? And certainly not, I think not for Jonathan and his brother, but for work situations in particular. Now, defining the issue together. And I'm assuming most people are here for work, so I'm going to just say that sometimes you can define the issue together and brainstorm possible solutions. And sometimes you're just at the point where it's like, the client that I had yesterday, we were working out this plan for 2 of their employees, was there's no brainstorming. Your job is that you need to do this, this, and this, and you're not doing this, this, and this. And so the brainstorming is past. However, in another situation, my client had a guy working on the floor, manufacturing, and this guy knew welding like the back of his hand. He was excellent at it, but he also had an ego. They didn't want to lose the guy. So my client, Dane, sat down with Sam and said, hey, we love what you can do here, but we have a problem. You've got this, your attitude is wrong. Well, in the conversation, it turns out that Sam had asked, the real names are Dave and Dane, but my assistant going through this said, Claire, you can't do Dave and Dane. You got to change one of them. So Sam is actually Dave, but we're going to call him Sam because I was going crazy with Dave and Dane. So Sam, Sam said, well, I'd really like to be a leader. And Dane said, well, you've got an attitude problem. So they gave him training. They gave him some EQ training, emotional intelligence training. And then they let him mentor a person or 2. And then I happened to be, they're one of my few clients that actually visit in person. And I saw 3 people around a table. And I said that, and they said, well, that's Dave. Sam, sorry, really Dave. Sam, Dave, has been promoted. And he's now a supervisor on the floor, and he's meeting with the 2 people he's supervising. So this is a situation where the conference and the collaboration really worked. So setting clear actions and check-ins. So the client that's got these two people that need to change their performance, what we worked out is, here's the expectations, and we're going to meet in a month to see if you've hit those expectations. So, and follow up and accountability. So for any of you that are delegating work to anybody else, at the end of this presentation, I have a click to a delegation checklist that I put together, because part of managing people effectively, and I'm suffering from this right now because I have not had a face-to-face meeting with my Filipino assistant in 3 weeks, and I know she's feeling the distance, and I've apologized, and we're meeting tomorrow morning. But regular check-ins are essential. And when I first onboarded her, I spent a lot of time onboarding her. So it's really important to understand that when you check in and have accountability, you're building trust. Okay. And I don't have chat open, but I don't see anything. Okay, so taking things personally. One of the most damaging things we can do, right, when we start taking things personally. So what is the story that you're telling yourself? One of my favorite Brene Brown quotes from Dare to Lead, wonderful book. Along with the 4 agreements, right? Don't take things personally, don't make assumptions, do your best, and honor your word. But don't take things personally. So it's often not about you, right? We think that we are major players in everybody else's life, and often we're just a walk-on or an extra, right? What they're doing, how they're behaving is actually from years of deep-seated emotional patterns, and we're just a bystander in those emotional patterns. So not taking things personally. We're going to get into your conflict style, but understanding how you react so that you can anticipate your reaction in advance. And then to your point, Neil, asking better questions, being curious. And I think the next time I do this, to your point, Neil, I'm going to build in curiosity a little bit stronger, because I do think being curious, and I have a book over there about that, but what else could be true here, right? Help me understand. Focusing on the issue, right? Facts are your friends is a really great way to stay focused on not the emotion, but the outcome that you want. All right, understanding your conflict style. So, some people are aggressive. I had to deal with a very aggressive guy a couple of years ago, and it was uncomfortable. And I'm going to bet, from the fact that you're in this group, and Collaborex is one of the most amazing networking groups I've ever been in, and the caliber of people that are in it are spectacular. So I'm going to guess that we don't have many aggressive people in here. It's more that you are at the effect of aggressive people, but it's good to know. Avoidant, we're going to get into, because I suspect that's the number. When I deal with people, most of my clients avoid conflict. They don't rush into it aggressively. Passive aggressive, oh, my favorite. Passive aggressive is when you're dealing with people who say that they'll do something and then don't, and pretend like it's no big deal, or lie, or blame somebody else, or get really angry because, as I learned from a former boyfriend who lied to me all the time, offense is the best defense. So when he made me angry, then I would forget what he did that made me angry. So understanding all of those. But what I find with my clients is most of them are avoidant. I'd love to know in this room, and I'm going to expand the group for a minute. So how many people here are avoidant? How many people in here avoid the conflict? Just raise your hand. I'm curious. Wow, I've got some brave people. All right. Well, we're going to do this anyway. All right, hang on. Now I got to minimize you. How do I do that? There we go. Oh, now I've made my mistake. All right, there we go. Back where I need you. Okay, so don't delay. Talk to them today, or not, because to Jonathan's point, sometimes, you don't want to have that conversation. It's really not necessary. So, For those of you that are avoiding, and I've actually lost my ability to see everyone, so give me 1 second and see if I can get that back. There you are. Let me put you in front. Okay. Give me a sec. All right, there we go. There are ways to do that, right? So using I statements instead of the perceived threat. I feel a certain way. And sometimes that works and sometimes it doesn't. Give me 1 second. I'm just going to fix this. All right. So start with validation or curiosity. Again, to your point, Neil, and saying things like, I know this is a tough topic, but I'd like to clear the air. The biggest thing, what have you lost by not standing up and having this conversation? Now, not in a case like Jonathan, where you ultimately decide that it's not worth it, but in other situations, it is. And it's that cost that I would have you focus on. Begin with the end in mind. So if you look at the benefit that you're going to get out of, and I find this so often with my clients when they're putting up with bad behavior from their employees, and then they don't want to have those tough conversations. What they've lost is efficiency. What they've lost is the floor staff. In fact, one of my clients did just let somebody go. He went through this whole thing, and set it up like, this is what we expect. This is what they expect. And then when the employee didn't fulfill the expectations, and they finally had the conversation and let him go, it was so clean. The employee didn't fight, didn't argue, understood, and that was the end of the conversation. So, yes, Jonathan.
Well, you've gotten me to think about the conflict I've had with my brother, and there is a reason that I should try and kind of smooth it out a little.
Okay.
It really is. My mom is 92. And when she passes away, if I have this conflict with my brother, it's going to be a shit show. But if we're more collaborative, then there'll be more of a sense of fairness and sharing and things like that. So that is a reason. And I also want to say something that reflects what Neil said. My conflict with my brother is because of challenges that he is having. And if I could recognize those challenges and just validate them and say this must be hard, then I think that will go a long way. I mean, isn't that what leadership is about? Is being empathetic to your employees. They're working at whatever organization for a reason. And for you to recognize that reason and see if you could align that reason with the goals of the company.
Absolutely. 100%. And to that point, you don't know. Often the basis of an argument is our need to be right. Human beings love to be right, right? I think that's what the car horn was built for, right? I'm right, get out of my way. I'm right, get out of my way. And so if we can get off that position that I need to be right and I need to validate that other person and help them feel understood. Mary Kay Ash, who's a phenomenal, like her leadership was like such an example for me, but she would say, people walk around with an invisible sign that says, I want to feel important. And the easiest way to make somebody feel important is to listen with the intent to understand instead of the intent to be understood. So listening to people with empathy and having them feel heard, having them feel validated is a gift that you can give to somebody. So a lot of times in conflict, if you can just do that and help them get to that point where their defenses are down. Marianne Williamson in her Return to Love, which I'm glad that I read when I was in my 20s, said damaged people damage other people. And so if you can, and a lot of times when I work with my client, I don't know if it's a good analogy or not, I'll say, think of that person as a wounded animal. And if you've ever seen videos of how long it takes to get a wounded animal to come out from whatever shelter they're hiding under, and you think about that human that you're dealing with as that wounded animal that needs to be lured out of that cave of fear that they live in, and you're leaving breadcrumbs to convince them to come out and not feel that level of fear or stress or upset in their life, that can help heal wounds. So, and it really can start with curiosity. So just some tips to having you, now know how to start a conversation. Can we talk about it? I'd like to hear your perspective. For you, Jonathan, I'm bringing this up because I care, right? Because you really want to have your mother's passage, one, as she's going through it, be smoother, and two, have some degree of you don't want all of the stresses that, right? I'm not talking to him and my mother's passed, right? So, yes, I definitely, the whole reason we're having this conversation is to encourage people to have that difficult conversation. So, and there's nothing wrong with pausing the conversation and saying, I can't have this conversation right now. This one group of data scientists that I was working with leadership training, the way they would put it when they were in their team meetings was, let's park this for now, which I thought was a great way of putting it, right? Data scientists, they has to be very clinical. So let's park this for now, right? I also work with car enthusiasts, so I think they like that one as well. So it's fine to stop a conversation when it's in the heat of the moment and give it a chance to calm down. All right, so practice makes progress, right? So I'm a huge fan of reflection. I suspect many people in this group are as well. So think about it after every conversation. What can you learn? Starting with a low stakes conversation can help you kind of get into it, and asking for feedback, right? That is also very helpful. Talking to somebody else before you have that conversation, airing out, particularly when anticipating their objections, or the more you can anticipate what they're going to say and be prepared to work with it through the conversation, the better the conversation will go. So we have, let me take a look, 20 minutes, give or take. So I'm gonna, all right, a conversation you've avoided. What do you want to say? What is one thing you want to remember? And then let's do some sharing. And then I've only got 2 more slides after this. So I'm going to stop sharing. Did I stop sharing?
Yes.
Okay, good. So anyone want to share something that's on their mind that they want some coaching or help with from me or the group?
Doesn't everyone else have dysfunctional families or have worked at dysfunctional organizations?
Did you unmute, Kismic?
I did.
All right, go for
I'm
it,
coming
girl.
back from the doctor, so sorry I'm in the car, but I have something, and it's not work related because I have pretty good bosses, but my so there's a relationship I have, and there's always animosity, there's always tension, even if there's no even if there's no communication. There's just, when you think about this person, or when I think about this person, there's always this tension already hold. So I think that's number one. So I guess the other thing is, when there is communication and I hear the other person speak to me, it's filtered through that tension, and I always feel like it's a passive aggressive conversation, or there's um, I just feel like there's always I said this person is always trying to take jabs at me. So
Why?
how?
Why do you think?
Because I feel like they want something that I don't want to give them.
Is that true? That's a story you're
Mm,
telling yourself. So is that a true story?
yeah, maybe,
Um,
maybe.
so it's always good. Is there anyone else you could fact check that story with?
Yes. Yes, I could.
I would think. And again, if you think that, you know, the antagonistic person that I was dealing with, who I affectionately called Little Davy, I realized, and nothing against short men, but he was a short man and with a huge ego. And the most braggadocio man I've ever encountered, and it happened to be a company I was a vice president for a brief period of time. And within a week of me being there, of him being there, and I was one of the people that said, yes, let's hire him. Somebody came to me and said, he's out to get you. And when I dug into it, it was jealousy, pure and simple. Pure and simple, jealousy and attention. So, and I finally had it out with him, and I don't know whether he got it or not, but the situation resolved itself after I pinpointed what it was, confronted him about it, which I took a lot of time preparing for, because I wanted to do it with as much love for him as I could and as much respect for him as I could. And I basically laid it out like, you putting me down like this in public in front of everybody else makes you look really bad. I know why you're doing it. It's not going to work. And it's unfair to everybody when you do that to me and you do it to other people as well. You just make me your primary punching bag, and it's unfair, and I won't stand for it anymore. He pretended to be surprised, but he stopped.
Okay.
But I had the validation from others who saw it. But I was also reacting myself. So I also did therapy and looked at a whole
Okay.
history in my life of why did I say hire him? Yes, because I had from my dad to my husband to my business partner to little Davy, I let these nasty men into my life. So I had to do my own work as well. Like, why was I so triggered? And why did I
Yeah.
allow? So it starts with you as well. Like, what's the work I need to do? Out of every adversity comes an opportunity. What's your opportunity here? And I guarantee you there's an opportunity.
Okay.
Rose.
Yeah.
Thank you. That was really good to hear. That was not my question, but that was an answer I needed to hear. So thank you for that, Kismet, as well. I'm curious what input you may have on when conflict, and by the way, the little baby, I can also relate. When the conflict has come to a head, all the tools have been used, it's basically over for the sake of like the pinnacle. However, there is still residual, like let's say cleanup to be had from a previous employer, like reimbursements, just sort of administrative stuff. And even getting through to the other side of the conflict and cleaning up the side of the street feels combative on a low level, even if I feel like I've owned my side. At what point do you suggest people just sort of let it go, even if there's like money's owed?
Well, I'll tell you, I had this with a client who sued her former employers. And I'm a coach, and sometimes I cannot help it and I give my advice. A lot of times I try to ask questions, but sometimes, and I was like, don't do this. Why are you doing this? And I still stand by the damage, and I think she wouldn't tell me what she was settled, but I think it was like $10,000. But the lawyer was the wrong lawyer, and it dragged up all of this shit that they threw at her when she was working there. And I'm like, why are you doing this? Stop. But she had to be right. She had to be right.
Yeah.
And I don't think that rightness was it came out the way she wanted it. Certainly didn't have the financial benefit that she thought she was going to get out of it. And you have to like weigh like the pros and cons, like the emotional reliving of that period. How much money is that worth to you?
Right. Right.
And we discount the emotional damage, right? Like, I just sent out an email about I'm on a news diet, right? Because there's only so much I can take of this, of Bozo's action. Sorry if anyone's political here, but it's just like, it's the insanity. Like,
Yeah.
I have to protect my own emotional well-being. That's number one, right? And yes, political action, all of that, I get it. But we are surrounded by so much negativity, and we live in a society that makes money off of negativity. We live in a society that like thinks that we live in a scarcity, fear-based society. And so the more you can shield yourself from that and cultivate your own healthy, positive outlook, the better you will be. So
Right.
let it go is my uh
Yeah.
Thank you.
yeah. And enjoy the letting go, Jonathan.
So I'm going to bring up an interesting conflict that I had at one of the few places I worked for where I was an employee. And I knew I was working there to kind of get back on my feet until I started my next thing. So I knew it was short term and I could leave when I wanted. But it had an owner with a big ego that was very jealous, and I was the operations manager running the place, and he had a big ego, and he was jealous how the employees kind of liked me and saw that I was organizing the place and that creating set procedures and rules and all this stuff. And this guy would like have a temper tantrum and start screaming at me in front of all the other employees and say ridiculous things like, I don't care how many degrees you have, because he dropped out of high school and he was felt bad about that. And I loved it when he did it because everyone bonded. I became a better leader. They cared about me more, they listened to me more, and they thought, oh, he needs some therapy. Like what's so
The person acting out is always revealed for their flaws, and the person that can handle it with grace is the person that looks better every time.
just like with yours, it made him look bad,
Yeah,
and people sympathized with me more, and it made his situation worse because then they liked me more.
yeah.
So
So I've only got 2 slides left, so we'll finish up, and then we can open it up for conversation. So let me go to the next one. So, just recapping, and again, we'll send out a link to the worksheet, or unless you want to put it in the chat now, Jonathan.
sure.
But prepare with intention, lead with empathy, stay clear and calm, focus on solutions, and then schedule the follow-up. And then I leave you with this. So a shameless plug for my upcoming leadership training program. The link there, yes, it'll get you on my mailing list. I send out an email at most once a week, and always with tips and tools. That's for a link to a free delegation worksheet. It's actually a checklist and I have a whole workshop on delegation, because so often what I find is that when people are delegating tasks, they don't spend the time and energy to get it set up right. So, conflict can be handled with clarity, connection, and courage. And I encourage you all to have one brave conversation and then celebrate the progress. Emotions have energy. Gratitude, celebrating the wins are all high energy that will get you much farther ahead than living in regret, shame, or fear. So we have 6 minutes. Anybody else have questions, concerns, want help with anything?
Any examples? Anything that's coming up
Kismet's back
that
on
you're
screen.
avoiding?
I'm sorry. I'm just in the car. I don't want to distract. I don't want to distract. But I'm remembering a time what you said, Claire, about it, to me, this whole workshop is a focus on personal and self-development. The more I grow or the more I deal with my story, the story changes outside of me. So that's what I'm getting from this workshop. But I think I'm remembering a time when I was working at a law firm. I had left and then I came back, and some of the people that were there prior to me leaving were still there when I got back. And I remember I was in a small office with a coworker, and I just remember that time going back was so tumultuous because I don't think she really wanted me in her office. She was there by herself for the longest, and then I came and we had to share the small space. But it was really hard navigating work, and I would tell myself it was so bad sometimes. I would tell myself some mornings like I should not feel afraid to go to work because I didn't want to deal with her attitude or what she was dealing with. You know, we all have things that we deal with, I know, but it was a really hard time. And I'm looking back and thinking to myself, I could have handled that so much differently.
So,
And
everything is a learning, right?
yeah,
I hate the word should, and I love that you use the word could, because should implies guilt and shame, where could is a much more positive way and then gives you a learning for the future. So,
yeah,
yes, you could have handled it differently and you didn't. So, letting it go and just accepting it and saying, all right, what did I learn out of it? And then moving on. One of my favorite statistic is that star baseball players hit 30% of their at bats. What does that mean? They fail 70% of the time. And so we have these situations in our life where we feel like we should have done better, but we're human. And I just was talking to a client today who was like really upset about the way she handled something. And I said, you're human. Like, you are human. So you handled it like a human would handle it. And there's nothing wrong with that. We're put here to learn. And as long as you're learning lessons, right?
yeah.
That's all you can
So
do.
so many times though, I wanted to just have that hard conversation. Like, what is it? Is it me? Is it what is it that's causing this tension in this office between us? But I just didn't know how. I didn't know how to address it because the someone said in the chat like the hardest part I think is the anticipation of it.
Well, and that's why I gave you very specific lines, right? And open-ended. Thank you, Evelyn. I think you're right. I sense some tension. Can we talk about it? It could have been as simple as she wanted the office to herself. Maybe she
Yeah,
was goofing off, and now you're in the office and she can't goof off as much, right? And it's that taking things personally, right? Like it could have
right.
had nothing to do with you. It could have been that she wanted the office privacy.
Yeah,
Um, but that curiosity, to Neil's point, I think is really very useful. And that's why, and we'll send out the link to the some of the phrases, because I think having those phrases in mind, in, open-ended and thoughtful stuff. So,
yeah.
but yeah, but as long as you don't beat yourself up over it.
Yeah.
That's a waste of time and energy.
Right, because can't go back.
No, and it
But
blocks
yeah,
solutions.
yeah. Well, thank
So,
you.
Yeah. Claire, this is great. Thank you.
Yeah.
I put the link in the chat. Um, please connect with Claire directly. I'll send out a follow-up, and Claire, feel free to send out any other follow-up, but the link has a lot of, I guess, the conversation points that we went through. So use that in your next conflict that's coming up, and then tell Claire about the positive results.
and I offer a free coaching session. So, and I'll send that link out.
Okay. Thank you so much, Claire. This is a great workshop. A lot of really good information that we all
Yes.
can apply. So, immediately to both personal and professional interactions.
All right. Well, I hope the rest of you have a wonderful day, and I'll send my link out and hope to see some of you.
Okay.
Thank you so much, Claire.
All right.
Thank you.
Bye. Have a great day.
Okay.
You too.